Hello and welcome. I'm Asuma Katauka and you are watching NewsX World. Let's take a look at some of the top stories. Israeli airstrikes kill at least 19 people in Gaza overnight, including newborn baby. Gaza Civil Defense reports multiple children among dead as global condemnation of offensive grows. Russia says it intercepted 159 Ukrainian drones in 12 hours across multiple regions, including Moscow. Drones were launched between 8 p.m. Tuesday and 8 a.m. Wednesday local time. German Defense Minister Boris Pistorius says Putin not serious about peace, using talks to stall. EU pushes for tougher sanctions on Russia amid continued attacks and stalled peace progress. Trump has proposed a $25 billion missile defense system dubbed Golden Dome, pledging it will be operational before the end of his term if re-elected. China's Commerce Ministry accuses the US of economic bullying over chip export controls, warning of legal action and global supply chain instability. Japan's April exports rise 2% year-on-year, matching forecasts despite 1.8% drop in shipments to US. Trade surplus with US climbs for fourth straight month as tariff risks cloud outlook. South Korea vows support for pharma and key sectors amid export slump. Weigh on trade. Drug maker Celltrion questions U.S. market strategy as Seoul pursues exemptions in ongoing trade talks. Climate researchers show tropical forest loss hits record high, driven by fires caused by climate change. World lost 67,000 square kilometers of primary forest in 2024, 80% more than last year. Israeli airstrikes on Gaza have killed at least 19 people overnight, including a 1-week-old baby, according to Gaza's Civil Defense Agency. The escalating violence has prompted the European Union to review its trade and cooperation agreement with Israel. 17 EU foreign ministers are backing the move, which will examine possible human rights violations under Article 2 of the EU-Israel deal. Israel has rejected the EU's move, calling it a misunderstanding of the region's complex realities. Meanwhile, the United Kingdom has halted trade talks, summoned Israel's ambassador, and sanctions West Bank settlers, condemning the offensive as morally unjustifiable. This is what the British Foreign Ministry Secretary stated.
Civilians in Gaza, facing starvation, homelessness, trauma, desperate for this war to end, now confront renewed bombardment, new displacement, and new suffering. And the remaining hostages, kept apart from their loved ones by Hamas for almost 600 days, are now at heightened risk from the war around them. As the Prime Minister and fellow leaders said yesterday, we cannot stand by in the face of this new deterioration. It is incompatible with the principles that underpin our bilateral relationship, rejected by members across this House, and frankly, it's an affront to the values of the British people.
Despite trucks entering Gaza with critical supplies, the UN reports aid has not yet been distributed. On the ground, deadly Israeli airstrikes and strikes continue in Khan Yunis, killing at least 7 people across multiple raids, as global pressure on Israel mounts. Russian President Vladimir Putin made his first visit to the Kursk region since Ukrainian forces were pushed out. During the visit, he toured the Kursk nuclear power station and ordered the increase of demining operations in the region as part of the efforts to secure the area. German Defense Minister Boris Pistorius says talks are still ongoing about U.S. participation in the next round of Russia sanctions. He insists pressure on Moscow must increase. This comes as Russia claims to have shot down 159 Ukrainian drones over several regions, including Moscow, in a 12-hour period. The drones targeted bordering regions and were launched between Tuesday and Wednesday morning. This comes after failed ceasefire talks between Presidents Trump and Putin. In another development, Italy's Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni says Rome is ready to help mediate Ukraine peace talks, but only if the Vatican agrees to lead, as suggested by US President Donald Trump. The Vatican has shown interest, but no talks have been confirmed yet. In Washington, U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio defended the administration's stance on Russia. He rejected claims that President Putin is stalling. Rubio told senators that Trump made no concessions to Moscow. He said U.S. sanctions remain in place and military support for Ukraine continues. Rubio also expects Russia to present draft ceasefire terms within days. He believes the proposal will reveal Moscow's true intentions. Listen into what Marco Rubio has said.
On the issue of Ukraine, here's what we can all agree on. There is no military solution to this crisis.
Right.
It will have to end in a negotiated settlement. And the fundamental challenge we have in Ukraine is this. Russia wants what they do not currently have and are not in.
Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky says new EU and UK sanctions will raise pressure on Russia. He urges tougher action on Russian oil, banks, and defense sectors. Zelensky insists sanctions are key to forcing Putin towards real peace talks. Here's what Zelensky said.
Сьогодні є важливі рішення щодо санкцій. Новий європейський санкційний пакет вже 17-й. Це крок в правильному напрямку. І має бути взагалі стільки санкційних кроків, скільки потрібно, щоб Росія зацікавилась миром та відчула повну ціну за агресію та бажання затягнути війну.
Meanwhile, Ukrainian President Advisor Mikhailo Podolyak says pressure is key. He urged the US and Europe to push Russia harder with tough sanctions. He warned that without pressure, Moscow will avoid real negotiations. Simultaneously, Russia sent a clear signal in the skies. 2 Tu-95M bombers flew over the Barents Sea near Norway. A foreign military escorted the Russian planes during the 4-hour flight. The escort nation remains unnamed. The United States has unveiled plans for a sweeping new missile defense initiative known as the Golden Dome, a high-tech system that President Donald Trump says will defend America against next-generation aerial threats. The program, inspired by Israel's Iron Dome, but far more advanced, will feature space-based sensors and interceptors capable of tracking and destroying missiles anywhere in the world, even from space. Trump says the system will be fully operational by the end of his term, with an initial $25 billion allocated in his new defense budget. The system will be overseen by Space Force General Michael Gillane and will centralize U.S. missile defense across land, sea, and space. Canada has expressed interest in joining the project, as global allies watch this historic step towards space-based defense. Let's listen to U.S. President Donald Trump on the dome.
Designed for the Golden Dome will integrate with our existing defense capabilities and should be fully operational before the end of my term. So we'll have it done in about 3 years. Once fully constructed, the Golden Dome will be capable of intercepting missiles even if they are launched from other sides of the world and even if they are launched from space. I'm also pleased to report that the One Big Beautiful Bill will include $25 billion for the Golden Dome to help construction get underway. That's the initial sort of a down deposit. And we have probably, you're talking about, General, we're talking about $175 billion total cost of this when it's completed.
We have a guest joining us, Madhav Nalapat, editor of the Sunday Guardian, live from New Delhi. To start off, what exactly is the Golden Dome system and how does it differ from existing US missile defense programs?
Well, look, the Iron Dome has been very helpful to Israel, the state of Israel, in preventing casualties for the civilian or military. There have been swarms of attacks by missiles and by other means from Gaza, from Lebanon, and the bulk of these, I would say the overwhelming number of these, have been intercepted, and civilian lives have been protected. So I think from President Trump's point of view, it makes perfect sense, one, to limit himself to a single term. He is not going the way Biden went, the error of trying for a second term, but announcing at the beginning of his term itself, in so many words, that he is a one-term president and that this will be completed during his term in office. I'd like to say that Europe also, it's not just Canada, it's Europe also that needs to undertake this kind of a project. And it needs and secondly, in the second instance, it needs the US allies in the Indo-Pacific. I'm looking at Australia, I'm looking at India, I'm looking at Japan, at least the AUKUS alliance, then the GCC countries. It needs all of that. And I think it's a very, very good idea. But let's be honest, there's no telling when a kinetic war will erupt between, I've been saying this some time, the two superpowers, US and China, and other countries that are friends of theirs joining on either side. It's very, very possible. And I think President Trump is doing a very wise thing by announcing this Iron Dome project. I would feel that the Europeans also should follow suit because it's very essential. This war, this Cold War 2.0 is unlikely to be what Cold War 1.0 was. It's a direct confrontation between the Soviet Union and the United States. That was avoided, but today's climate, today's situation is very different, and a kinetic war cannot be ruled out. And countries should plan for the worst. Leaders should plan for the worst. And from that point of view, I would say that President Trump is doing the right thing in ensuring that there is a Golden Dome system. Naturally, for Trump, if Israel is an Iron Dome, he wants a Golden Dome. But the reality is, it's a very necessary project, not only for the US, for North America, but also for allies of the US, the Quad allies, the GCC countries, and other countries in particular that are firm allies of the US. I think it's necessary for all of them. So all of us will be involved in this kinetic war. It will be a war of democracy versus authoritarianism, and we'll all be involved in it.
Madhav,
Thank you.
And that's really interesting, and it leads me to ask, how feasible is the timeline for getting this system operational by the end of Trump's term, considering the complexity and scale of what's being proposed?
Look, a long way has come since the Iron Dome was set up. The US has come a long way in missile defense. Fortunately, despite all the misleading propaganda that's fed by propagandists who are friendly to the other superpower, the US is still far and away the leader in such matters. And in there, for example, a country like India with abundant brain power. We're not talking only of human power, we're talking of brain power. Indian technicians, scientists, inventors have proved themselves across the world. And I think, frankly, the two largest democracies in the world, India and the United States, they need to work much closer together. And in my personal view, it is a very feasible project, given the immensity of knowledge that we have gained in the last 2 decades and the immensity of the technological changes that have come upon us. Look at today's world. Look at the world 5 years ago. Look at the world 15 years ago. It's a completely different world. AI itself is moving into a super AI period. The hyper AI will come. So let's be honest. Today is the age of rapid change, accelerated change. So I'm very confident that that deadline is feasible, and I think it's feasible for Europe as well. It's feasible for the Quad members as well, and I think the Quad members and GCC countries are absolutely essential to protect. So I believe that given the scientific talent, and I've had personal access to some of our outstanding scientists and who are working in the United States, in various laboratories, and in India, and in parts of Europe. The Germans have welcomed Indians with open arms. The UK is frankly, I mean, doing an FTA with India. So I would say overall, the odds are very, very good of this coming to fruition during the term of President Trump. And it will be a fantastic addition to the Trump legacy. Thank you.
Let's switch gears for a moment. Some critics have criticized or raised concerns about demilitarization of space. What are the geopolitical risks or potential escalations associated with deploying interceptors and sensors in orbit?
Look, they're crying after the horse has bolted. The stable doors have been broken into, and the horses have bolted. There is already militarization of space. India, for example, tested a dogfight between two satellites. The United States is doing that every day. So is China. So is Russia, the four major powers of the world. So I'm sure are the Europeans, who are no laggards when it comes to science and technology, or the Japanese or the Koreans. None of them are any laggards in science and technology. So very honestly, in my personal view, I think it's a very feasible timeline. And I do believe that the abundance of talent in the democracies will make this a fruition, because the Trump administration will be very serious. It picks a security, whether it's Hexet, whether it's Tulsi Gabbard, whether it is the Vice President Vance. These are outstanding people. They know the rest of the world. And I think we are getting leadership in parts of Asia that are also aware of that. And in my view, I'm very optimistic that this deadline will be met and possibly exceeded. Thank you.
And now, from a strategic standpoint, how might adversaries like China, Russia, or North Korea respond to the Golden Dome? Could it trigger an arms race or spur development of new countermeasures?
Look, let's assume that during the Second World War, the British neglected their defenses. Actually, they did, but fortunately, the Americans were there waiting, and very soon they brought their defense industries to speed. And once the Japanese made the mistake of going into Pearl Harbor, they entered the war formally. I think that is a strategic error on the Japanese side. But the reality is that American arms, as Churchill said, give us the tools and we'll finish the job. The job was finished by not only the UK, but by the USSR. And Roosevelt was wise enough to ensure that the USSR also was amply supplied, because he recognized Hitler as a much bigger threat to civilization than the Soviet Union, which he correctly figured would not last very long, and it did not. It collapsed by the very close of 1991. So, look, we are in a different strategic universe. This is a new Cold War. I think, some of my very good friends in Europe have not yet woken up to this, but slowly they are waking up. And the US under Trump has definitely woken up to it, and his team. So have we in India, since Prime Minister Modi came to power, for example. So and Japan, Ishiba. I'm sorry to say that the South Koreans have jailed President Yoon, who was fully cognizant of the reality. I've been feeling that's a mistake, but the reality is this is a new Cold War. It's Cold War 2.0. It's no longer Cold War 1.2. And I'm very certain my good friends in Europe will come around to that, as my good friends in North America have. Thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing that insight as we move on to our next story. Thank you, Dr. Madhav Nalapat, for your valuable insights. In a major policy shift, the European Union has agreed to lift its economic sanctions on Syria, marking a potential turning point after 14 years of civil war. EU Foreign Policy Chief Kaja Kallas made the announcement after talks in Brussels, saying the goal is to help rebuild a peaceful and inclusive Syria. Core sanctions targeting the Assad regime and security-related restrictions will remain, but the EU will ease measures on energy, transport, and reconstruction, inviting European businesses back into the country. Syria's foreign minister praised the decision as a boost to stability and economic recovery. The move comes just days after US President Donald Trump announced a similar lifting of sanctions. US Secretary of State Marco Rubio warned that Syria's transitional authority may be close to collapse. The EU stressed future cooperation depends on Syria's commitment to human rights and inclusion. Now we move on to Africa. Sudan has accused the United Arab Emirates of directly attacking Port Sudan, marking the first time it has publicly named the UAE in its civil war. Sudanese ambassador to the UN Al-Harith Idris said the May 4th strike was carried out by drones and MQ-9 warplanes launched from Emirati bases. Let's listen in to his key findings.
So the key finding, the UAE and RSF have strategically planned to attack Port Sudan, a vital maritime hub for the Red Sea, plays a crucial role as temporary capital of Sudan and government dignitaries and security residents, and also a hub, safe haven for the displaced in their southlands. Its strategic location makes it a focal point of UAE and RSF activity and geopolitical interest. However, this prominence also makes it susceptible to various security threats, including drone attacks.
He claimed the attack was retaliation for a Sudanese army strike in RSF-held Niala that killed 13 foreigners, including alleged Emirati personnel. Port Sudan had been a safe zone in the conflict until this strike hit military and civilian areas. The UAE denied the charges, calling them baseless and accusing Sudan's government of deflecting from its internal responsibilities. A UAE official said it condemned violence and rejected the accusation of any involvement. Sudan severed diplomatic ties with the UAE earlier this month, citing its alleged supply of advanced arms to the Rapid Support Forces. The conflict began in April 2023 over a failed plan to merge the army and RSF. US Secretary of State Marco Rubio warned that outside powers were turning Sudan's war into a destabilizing proxy conflict. Some Democrats in Congress are now pushing to block arms sales to the UAE over its suspected role. Meanwhile, the Sudanese army claimed it had fully cleared Khartoum state of RSF fighters. Despite that, RSF drone attacks have increased, targeting infrastructure in government-held areas and worsening humanitarian conditions. Here's what the Sudanese military spokesperson had to say.
وفي هذا السياق نعلن اليوم اكتمال تطهير كامل ولاية الخرطوم من أي وجود لعناصر ميليشيا الدغلو الإرهابية وتطهير عاصمتنا الوطنية من دنس المتمردين وأعوانهم مؤكدين أن ولاية الخرطوم خارج.
Until now, Port Sudan has avoided direct attacks, acting as a vital hub for aid and diplomacy. The May 4th strike marks a dangerous escalation in a war that shows little sign of ending. We move to South Africa. A crucial diplomatic meeting is set for Wednesday at the White House as US President Donald Trump hosts South African President Cyril Ramaphosa. The talks come amid tension after Trump accused South Africa's government of racism against white farmers and even alleged a genocide, claims denied by the South African government and farmers themselves. Ramaphosa requested the meeting in a bid to salvage strained ties, hoping to clear what he calls damaging mischaracterizations. The meeting marks Trump's first with an African leader since returning to office. Trump is expected to push for action against genocidal rhetoric, reforms to South Africa's trade policies, and greater security for white farmers. Ramaphosa, however, says he wants to focus on jobs, trade, and strengthening bilateral relations.
Most important, that's what this book is getting. They want to come out of United States with really good trade gear, investment, promotion. We invest in United States, and they invest in us, and we want to strengthen those relations. And we want to consolidate good relations between our two countries. So I'm very positive. I'm looking forward to. We are going to have an opportunity to discuss geopolitical issues, not only Israel, but also Ukraine. And so all these matters will be on the table for proper discussion. And we are very rational when it comes to discussing global and geopolitical matters. And we will put South Africa's interest first, and our own foreign policy positions will be well clarified. So fear not. We are going to have a really good meeting.
Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro has criticized the U.S. Supreme Court's decision allowing the end of temporary protected status, or TPS, for Venezuelan migrants. Speaking at a political event in Miranda, Maduro said he rejects and repudiates the move, calling it a violation of rights. He argued that migration is not a crime, but stripping TPS is. The ruling clears the way for the Trump administration to end legal protections for some 350,000 Venezuelans living in the U.S. TPS had shielded them from deportation due to Venezuela's ongoing political and humanitarian crisis. The Department of Homeland Security welcomed the Supreme Court's decision, but has not yet provided details on next steps. For now, Venezuelans under TPS remain in limbo, unsure of what comes next. Maduro says the move is unjust, and urges U.S. leaders to reconsider. He claims this decision puts thousands at risk. Here's what the Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro has said.
Yo estaba viendo las noticias que llegan de Estados Unidos, que le quitaron el TPS a 350,000 venezolanos. TPS era una forma de protección para atraer migrantes venezolanos a Estados Unidos. Yo rechazo y repudio el retiro del TPS como protección especial a la migración venezolana. Migrar no es delito. Quitarle el TPS sí es delito, porque es un derecho que ellos tienen.
Attorneys say the Trump administration deported Vietnamese and Burmese migrants to South Sudan, violating a federal court order. The emergency motion filed on Tuesday alleges that at least a dozen migrants were removed without proper notice or a chance to contest. A Burmese national with limited English was among them. His lawyer, Jacqueline Brown, says he was removed without an interpreter. She discovered he was already deported when she tried to meet him Tuesday morning. U.S. District Judge Brian Murphy previously barred deportations to third countries without written notice and hearings. He warned the deportations might constitute criminal contempt. South Sudan remains under a U.S. do not travel advisory due to armed conflict. Lawyers are urging the judge to order the migrants' return and block further removals. The Department of Homeland Security hasn't confirmed the deportations. The legal battle adds to growing scrutiny of the administration's deportation policies. A fiery showdown on Capitol Hill. Secretary of State Marco Rubio defended the Trump administration's tough immigration stance, clashing with Senator Van Hollen over the deportation of an alleged MS-13 gang member. During a Senate Foreign Relations hearing, Van Hollen said he regretted confirming Rubio to the cabinet, accusing him of running a campaign of fear and repression. Rubio fired back, calling the criticism a sign he's doing his job. The exchange escalated as Rubio accused Van Hollen of meeting with a known human trafficker in El Salvador, a claim the senator strongly denied. Rubio also defended his revocation of student visas for foreign nationals allegedly involved in campus violence, declaring that visas are a privilege, not a right. Let's listen in.
For Secretary of State. I yield back.
May I respond?
You may say.
Well, first of all, your regret for voting for me confirms I'm doing a good job, based on what I know.
Well, that's just
Your
a
record and
flippant
what you
statement,
did.
Mr. Secretary.
Can I respond, Mr. Chairman?
You may.
I didn't ask.
Senator,
question.
please let the Secretary have
I'd be
the floor.
happy to, but then I can respond to his.
Your time's up, Senator, and willfully used, I might add.
Well-
Your remarks do not represent the view of this committee.
Well, Mr.
Secretary, please.
Well, I'd like to. I can't respond to everything.
SpaceX has launched another batch of Starlink satellites using a brand new Falcon 9 rocket that took off from Cape Canaveral. At 11:19 p.m. Eastern Time Zone, the rocket carried 23 Starlink broadband satellites to low Earth orbit, expanding the company's global internet constellation. This mission was delayed by a day after an abort occurred just before liftoff on Monday night. SpaceX didn't immediately explain what caused the last-minute stop. Tuesday's successful flight marked the debut of this Falcon 9 first-stage booster, a rare event as SpaceX usually reuses its rockets. Roughly 8 minutes after launch, the booster completed its first landing, touching down smoothly on the drone ship. Just read the instructions stationed in the Atlantic Ocean. This recovery keeps SpaceX's reuse strategy strong, helping to lower launch costs and turnaround times. Meanwhile, the rocket's upper stage continued its climb, releasing at all 23 Starlink satellites into orbit about 65 minutes after launch. These satellites will join thousands already deployed as part of SpaceX's goal to provide global internet coverage. This mission was SpaceX's 60th Falcon 9 flight in 2025 and the 43rd dedicated Starlink launch of the year, reflecting the company's aggressive push in satellite-based communications and rapid launch cadence. Well, that's all we have time for. We will continue to bring more news updates from around the world.